is IBS, or irritable bowel syndrome, Awareness Month. It's estimated 10 to 15% of the global population struggle with irritable bowel syndrome. Still, not many are formally diagnosed. So joining us live with what you need to know is Jennifer McDaniel of McDaniel Nutrition Therapy. Jen, thank you so much for being here today.
Yes, happy Gut Health Month.
Happy Gut Health Month. Oh, and do I love to celebrate this one. Now, before we get into a little bit about these symptoms, I just want to start out that a lot of these people, it actually goes undiagnosed.
Yes, 75% of people who have syndrome or this IBS potential like symptoms, and we're talking about symptoms, it can be lots of bloating, it can be cramping, it can be irregularity, constipation or diarrhea. 75% of people might be having these symptoms, but it's not been formally diagnosed.
Wow, so they're just feeling their symptoms and they're just thinking this is life, this is what I have to exist as.
Yeah, and that's something that we absolutely need to talk to our doctors or our dietitians about, because 70% of people actually won't even do that. You know, they won't talk to their, and I think there's reasons for it. Maybe we're embarrassed, maybe we think it's normal, maybe we've been dealing with this for so long, but irritable bowel syndrome is something that we can absolutely help make better for an individual, so it's really worth sharing with your professional that these things are going on for you.
Right, which is what I love, that there is a plan of action. So why don't we start with tip number 1 to kind of help people who might be having some of these issues?
Yeah, so the important thing to remember is not just a gut issue, it's also a brain issue. Our brain and our gut are in constant communication. They're always talking through our nervous system. So when we're feeling more stress or anxiety, where do we feel it? We feel it in our stomach. I mean, just preparing for today's interview, get a little nervous, we feel it there, right? But people with IBS have a real sensitivity to that. So we can't just work on the diet, we have to really also work on the mental health piece of this as well, to be able to settle everything down and to just feel better.
I feel like that's becoming more and more what we're learning about is how interconnected the gut and the brain are. I know even they are talking some brain disease might be more of like metabolic diseases. So it's interesting to hear you say this, really.
Yeah, and also how we care for, you know, the diet then affects mood too, right? So when we're not eating really well, we might feel that mentally. So they just go hand in hand. It's called the gut-brain axis, you know, so really important that we address both.
Okay, which I get, because when I get nervous, my stomach hurts, so I understand this. Okay, now we have tip number 2, which is maybe some people might be a little overwhelmed by the mind care. That's a big thing to tackle, but tip number 2 is very feasible.
Right, it's about getting enough fiber, getting enough plants into the diet, and everybody needs that regardless of IBS, right? We want to eat our fruits and our vegetables, our beans, our nuts, and our seeds, but there's a certain type of fiber that might be better for IBS called soluble fibers. It helps with regulation of digestion, and so we get soluble fibers in fruits like bananas and citrus. We get it in seeds, chia seeds, if you've heard of those, beans. So we get these soluble fibers in certain foods, and they tend to be better. But people don't want to go run out and just get a ton of fiber, right? We want to go low and slow as we introduce fiber into our diet, because that can exacerbate symptoms if we do it too quickly.
Right. I'm glad that you mentioned that. And then, of course, I know you were also saying adding the water in with the fiber.
Yes, and this is a great time to work with a dietitian too, because a dietitian can help you understand what are some of the trigger foods for you, what are the fibers that seem to work well, what are the ones that don't, and that can be hard to do on your own, so pair up with a dietitian who specializes in gut health.
And speaking of pairing up with a dietitian, tip number 3 is all about letting someone know.
Yeah, that's right. Talk to your health professional. Do not suffer in silence. If this is disruptive to you, then it's worth speaking up and advocating for yourself.
Yes, because as we mentioned, a lot of people are going through this and they're just not saying anything.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just helpful to hear, oh, that's actually normal, or that's not normal. And so just to get that validation can help relieve, you know, some of the stress and then improve the IBS symptoms just by getting the knowledge.
Yes, that is true. It all goes hand in hand. Once you know, you have that knowledge, you're going to feel better about your gut. Well, thank you so much, Jen, for joining us today. As always, McDaniel Nutrition Therapy. You can learn more about Jen and her business by visiting your screen right there or learning more, ksdk.com/showme.